Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us and joining myself, Andrew De Lange, again. This is my third year with the MENA ISC and with the team at VirtuPort. Unfortunately, we cannot be meeting in person, but this virtual conference is a fantastic initiative. And we're very fortunate to be able to engage with the people that have joined. And thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation. This presentation is going to be a little bit about navigating the noise and focusing on what's needed to build an effective threat intelligence or cyber threat intelligence program inside of your organization. So let me start off by introducing myself. My name is Andrew De Lange. I'm the solutions architect for Anomali. And I've over 13 years in cybersecurity experience in incident response, threat and vulnerability management, SOC and research. And 6 of those years have been dedicated to cyber threat intelligence as a whole. And in my time back in South Africa, I had the privilege of working with some of the biggest financial institutions on the continent of Africa. And subsequently, after moving to Anomali, I've had even greater privilege of engaging with some of our wonderful customers in the Middle East, some very, very interesting and some very dynamic environments to operationalize the threat intelligence into. So let's just dive straight into what the topic is and kind of understanding what threat intelligence really does encompass. How do you really take threat data and threat information and you operationalize that inside of your environment and making sure that you get the best return on investment when it comes to building a program, including the people, the processes, and the data that you'll be consuming. So let's look at some of the different components or puzzle pieces that makes a threat intelligence program. So let's look at feeds. These are things like indicators and observable data feeds. Those are kind of high volume threat indicators that you will use to try and do correlation with your internal data. Looking at things like reports and threat bulletins. Those are information and data points that are key to a program. Deep and dark web. This is a very strange topic to touch on. I think there are a lot of deep and dark web vendors out there that don't really engage in what you would like to get from an underground or a closed source of intelligence service offering. There are a handful of them that actually are able to dive deeper into the threats that are available or that are prominent in places that we cannot usually get to with regular browsers and without general access. So be very wary of deep and dark web intelligence, if you want to call it that. Tips or threat intelligence platforms. These are tool sets and they are enablers for a threat intelligence program internally. And that's where Anomali is a leader and does very good work in terms of the technology that we can provide to operationalize data and do things like indicator expansion on top. Compromised credentials and compromised credit card feeds. These are risk data points that are generally used in financial services for compromised credit cards. Compromised credentials are indeed a nice data point for us to look at when we are trying to investigate something like phishing and trying to understand a little bit more about how exposed we are and how many of our accounts are out there. And we're going to touch a little bit later on in a use case using compromised credentials. Browser plugins, these are just tool sets and time-saving solutions that are available. Social media monitoring, these are it's also just threat data, looking at social engineering information that could be out there, risk to your brand. And the list goes on and on of these different puzzle pieces that make a threat intelligence program. So are these things threat intelligence on their own? No, not at all. You know, each one of them, as stated here, has value to add to a program. Some do more than others, but they are not in their own little ways a threat intelligence program. They do kind of offset each other to make sure that you get the best from your data. But other than that, there's a lot more to dive into. So let's take a look at PIR, or prioritize or priority threat intelligence requirements and information requirements. And these are unique to you as an organization and as an enterprise. And there's a following factors that play a role when you're building your program to understand the different data points that you need to focus on. And these are following factors that you should be looking at. So let's look at your geographic location. Where are you located in the world? Are you looking at potential threats that are targeting your geographic location? And even deeper into that, looking at your business vertical. So let's say, for instance, you have a threat actor that is an APT that is very focused on banking services within a specific country. If you fall under that category, those are your prioritized intelligence requirements that are at a high level, but you can break them down a little bit deeper into things like your internal technologies and processes. For example, which systems do you have inside of your network? Which type of crown jewels are you trying to protect, and what's sitting around them? Threat modeling is basically taking all that data and building threat models internally to understand risk posture and things like that. And looking at external threat models, these are what we've talked about from your partners and from feed providers. And these are contextual data points that takes your external view of what's happening in the world and bringing those things together with your internal threat modeling exercises and building a kind of a assessment for yourself as to where your PRRs should be focused at. Looking at things like your attack surface, like we said, you can start defining your attack surface the moment you start finding your PRRs. Stakeholders, these are the people or the groups inside of your organization and outside that will be consumers of the output from your threat intelligence team. And of course, historical trends and data. So there's a lot of information that can be derived from data that is expanded over time, because you start to look at things a little bit differently. And we're going to dive into a use case using a phishing example a little bit later on. Looking at this quadrant, this is just an interesting thing that is in there, and there's no magic when it comes to threat intelligence. Sure, there are different ways to and metrics that you can measure certain vendors by, and you should absolutely do so, but there's no real magic bullet or type of scenario where you have got something that you can just go buy off the shelf and it's going to fit your intelligence requirements. Let's take a look at a threat intelligence framework and kind of how it's defined in the marketplace, or how it's defined in general. And that's using evidence-based data, context indicators, and mechanisms to formulate and share actionable intelligence. So this again comes back to your PIRs and your sources of data and your intelligence, and how it runs through the chain of collection and through dissemination and operationalizing. But there is a general framework that can be followed when looking at this, and kind of starting at the point of sources of data. So these are your external and internal data sources that can help you understand a little bit more of your internal landscape versus the situational awareness data coming from external factors like your threat feed. And these are in many different forms that can come in. So these are from your vendors, these are from people that you might be of a sharing community part of, infrastructure logs that you are looking at as well, situational awareness data from data analytics and web sources, and of course getting emails from colleagues and community members around specific threats that you should be looking at. Now, collecting that information, obviously, there's a way that you need to look at it, so that you don't collect any redundant or useless information to what your PIR is defined as. And these can come in the form of automated threat feeds, manual collection. So, for example, reading a blog and kind of scraping the data from there and pushing it downstream, and kind of ad hoc data points, which come in the form of emails or kind of sharing communities and stuff like that, or just internal sharing information. Taking the data from your collection and then analyzing that, kind of understanding if it's really relevant to what's happening or that I should be focusing on, and kind of doing profiling of adversaries and campaigns and things like that to understand if the external data and the internal data kind of match together in a way that will yield results for your program. And then interpreting that data, turning the analyzed information into actionable data that can be operationalized, again, coming from different places like feeds and reports and bulletins and advisories, and strategic recommendations that are more of a trend analysis exercise that happens over time. Then obviously sharing that information out. Sharing information is important in the sense that it kind of almost closes the loop. So the feedback loop is one of the more important aspects when it comes to a program. This happens after sharing. So sharing of data happens in different stages, and in the next slide we'll dive a little bit more into that. But sharing of intelligence is kind of automated in the sense that you're using your technologies to automate threat indicators into your security controls for kind of proactive actioning and reactive actioning, but also in the form of finished documents that goes up to your management or to your chain of command, whichever way you want to look at it. And kind of assisting your incident response team to help with what they're looking at as well. And of course, all of these, the collection, the analyzing and interpretation of threat data happens over 3 subgroups of threat intel. So you strategic, tactical, and operational. No doubt you've heard these terms before, but they are kind of broken down into a strategic, which is more a long time data point. Tactical and operational is kind of more to the point, daily operational threat data. So using this methodology and using this framework, obviously we want to continuously improve the sources that we get from data from, the way that we embed ourselves in analyzing, for example, upskilling in the way that we collect threat data as well. And then of course, continuous improvement on sharing. So if you're kind of starting off, you're sharing from point A to point B, but over time, you might have a bigger reach into the business of your organization. And you could start influencing some really solid business decisions with cyber threat intelligence data. Taking down the threat intelligence concept and looking at the tactical, operational, and strategic intelligence, we're going to break that down into a couple of ways that you need to understand it. So obviously the collection, who are the consumers, who does benefit from the sharing of this, and what are the time horizons. So if you look at the collection, there's some data points that you could be looking at, like endpoint monitoring, logs, forensic evidence, and threat intelligence feeds from your feed providers. Then consuming that data, and then kind of who would be the customer, if you want to call them that, for this type of output for tactical intelligence. Those would be the incident response team, threat hunters, and your blue team internally. And how is the information shared in general? So it can be shared via protocols like Stix Taxi, using an API connection from your threat intelligence platform to their taxi client, and just sharing in general kind of TLP reports, bulletins, stuff like that. Even as simple as something on a closed chat group that you have, and like these secure channels. And the time horizon for sharing of tactical intelligence is direct. It's very immediate. It's to the point. Observe, analyze, and share. Operational intelligence is same kind of concept, but however, collection might be a little bit different than tactical. Looking at things like your open sources, your feeds, sharing communities and stuff like that. And kind of the consumer of more operational data, which is more this, think of it like, okay, well, for the day's operations, we've done the following, or for the week's operations, we've done the following. And those will go into, for example, your information risk or your CSO head, or some executives that might look into that, or a TLP audience that could be an external party to your program. And sharing, same thing, in TLP reports and secure channels can be used for this. Time horizon for this type of operational data is a near time horizon, so it's not kind of immediate to the point as the tactical data, but it would be kind of on a recurring basis on a daily schedule, for example. So you'd have to have a set reporting, the daily activity report or a weekly activity report, and then also in real time make sure that the operational data is shared with obviously some of the tactical consumers as well. Then, of course, from a strategic side, we're looking at a more of a further time horizon, which would be looking to enhance the security posture of the organization by providing analyzed data, by looking at what happened over the last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, where did our security controls fail the most. And this is very important to understand the kind of the breakpoints inside of your organization, and also the very valuable sources of threat intelligence data that you consume. So doing an analysis of for a feed provider over a year would be able to tell you that if the data that this specific vendor is providing you is of good information to you, And for that, you obviously need tool sets to be able to kind of analyze the data for you, because you're talking millions and millions of indicators that are coming in. And how do you determine the relevance without a platform of sorts to help you analyze that? So if we're going to be looking at an intelligence program as a whole, we need to understand that threat intelligence as an operation inside of an organization can sit within the business, can sit within the SOC, and can sit within IR, forensics, and remediation. And what I mean by sit within, I don't mean physically sit within, but the intelligence functionality of a business or an organization needs to have an overarching arm into these different components within an organization. For example, making more strategic business decisions from a security aspect will definitely have input from the threat intelligence team. Same thing for SOC and monitoring, IR and forensics. These are kind of, again, coming back to the time horizons. These would be very, very key data points from your intelligence team, your intelligence practitioners inside the organization, to make sure that the processes are driven and defined and refined as you kind of go along in your journey. So very important thing to have inside of a threat intelligence program is to have a plan, right? Let's call this a flight plan. So where do you start off? Perhaps you've been doing some data gathering, but you're not really operationalizing the data the way that you should. So you might be a little bit further down the line than an entity that has got zero threat intelligence functionality or tools or data that they want to operationalize. So let's say, for example, if you're looking at a flight plan for a threat intelligence program, then if this would be, let's say, 2020 and you are at level 0, there's probably little value in your data gathering, because you're just kind of grabbing data from thin air and trying to make sense of it. And you're looking probably at a global perspective and a region and industry perspective. But once you kind of set the plan in motion and kind of drive your PIRs a little bit better, you'll see that obviously the next step would be a couple of months down the line. Oh, we have a platform now, which means we can really make a little bit more sense of that. We are collecting from open source feeds. We're collecting via emails, and we're collecting via web sources. And also, if you're looking at deep and dark web sources as well, you are now collecting data from there as well, if there is any value in that. And again, looking at more of a global and a region and in an industry reach, this can be somewhat valuable to your organization and can set the stage for the team to obviously expand into the business, to grow a little bit more in terms of headcount, get more funding for tools, and get more data points that obviously do cost money. And money is a big factor when it comes to building a program, because building a program is about showing the value and showing the ROI, return on investment, to the people that are basically in charge. So in 2021, for example, this is 1 year or 8 months down the line, what you're going to be doing is you're going to go into the next phase of your flight plan, which is kind of delivering very valuable data, because you're going to be collecting from your open sources, the same that you've done in the previous stage. And what you've now doing is you're actually having a little bit more of an applicable intelligence kind of program, where your PRRs are a little bit more defined, and you understand a little bit more where to focus your energies to. And now you're kind of changing it up and looking at not just the global threat landscape, regional landscape, and the industry that you're in, but you're also focusing inside your organization. So you're marrying your internal telemetry with your external threat sources. Next step obviously would be a extremely valuable not even the end to the program, but you will start obviously having a little bit more defined, and as you start refining a little bit more, maybe you're onboarding more people. You are now very entrenched in kind of sharing communities as well. They are sharing information back to you, and you're getting very, very applicable threat data that you can apply inside your organization with the help of your different tool sets. And then, of course, obviously the invaluable stage, let's call that, stage 5 of your program, where you're now at a very mature level. PRRs are defined. You have processes in place. You are having KPIs and metrics assigned to your analysts. And it's a very, very rewarding situation when you are creating internal intelligence and protecting the business by making your security controls better, by telling them, hey, we've discovered this. It's associated with a specific actor that's targeting our industry, and we want you to block this. And then if you proactively feed security or the indicator data to the security controls, and you detect a hit on one of those, you've basically protected your organization before an event actually happened. So before we finish off, let's go into a simple use case for using email attack data in an intelligence program. And I'm going to run through this a little bit quick. So let's see if, like, you are investigating a phishing campaign on day one of your program, and you're trying to understand a little bit more about who's targeting you, what type of lures they are using in their email campaigns, who are the targets for these campaigns, are there any attachments, or looking at email header data and stuff like that. But more importantly, if you kind of take into the concept on the left-hand side, you'll see kind of the flow. So there you have your attacker sends a phishing email to a couple of people inside the organization, Mary, Lucas, Joe, Andrew, to the payroll, Charlotte, and you make notes of these and kind of tick them down in this campaign, understanding what was the theme of the campaign, in which language was it written. Obviously, if in our region, if you're getting an email, a phishing email that's written in Arabic, that's a little bit more targeted than some gentleman sitting in the Ukraine trying to target you with an Apple phishing campaign written in English. You have to understand the level of threat that you're dealing with, because you are more likely to open an email that is written in your language than something else. So just be very mindful of that when you're doing an investigation into your phishing campaigns. Using your compromised credential database, we all love compromised credential databases. Like I said before, dark web vendors, the shady ones, will sell you your credentials that have been compromised, but they basically scraped them off of something like Pastebin, or looked in VirusTotal and found a couple of compromised credentials over there. But using the compromised credential information inside your organization is a key point to analyzing phishing campaigns. So if you have a compromised credential database that contains, for example, Mary, Joe, Andrew, Charlotte, and Leroy, you kind of expect them to receive phishing. Because their data or their email addresses are known to be compromised. But now, not known to be compromised are 4 other emails that have received the same email in the same campaign. And you should probably now understand that, well, these are now definitely compromised because they're receiving emails. Looking at something like payroll@company.com or HR or sales@company.com, this could be more of a opportunistic spray and pray attempt at catching a group of email addresses inside your organization. So think of that as a very, very opportunistic kind of casting a wide net from the attacker. Then obviously taking that data and bringing that into your platform can tell you a very, very good story, because what you're doing is you're making links between certain things. You're looking at the compromised emails that have been targeted, trying to look at, for example, the attachment that was sent. What are the hash values of the attachment? What is does it drop any other files? What are their hashes? Are those files associated with any known malware campaigns in the wild? If yes, then you know that, for example, this malware is being distributed on a global scale to something inside of your business vertical, and you have now become a victim of that. So connecting those dots together is very key in determining kind of who your attackers are, and understanding a little bit more about their modus operandi and TTPs that we all are familiar with. So this is what it would look like if you kind of pull the data into a platform such as the Anomaly platform, for example, and you kind of pull your compromised credentials in there as well. And now what you're seeing is that if you are looking at, for example, in the middle there, you have that purchase@wagai.com, which was the sender. Then all of a sudden, when you make the link inside of your platform that this is part of an Emotet malware campaign, you can see that you've already added context to the phishing campaign. Also added is the hash that maps to a threat bulletin, which is also relevant inside of your platform. And you keep seeing that you keep adding the context as to understanding kind of which malware campaigns you are being targeted with. If there are any APT associations, are they sending emails to you? So you kind of build a little bit more of a contextual view of using phishing data and pulling that all into your platform. Then obviously mapping that to things like the kill chain, the diamond model, and to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. This will yield very, very solid results when you start mapping your intrusion and what you're observing as to where in the kill chain are you stopping the attacks. Because once you get onto the actions on objectives in the kill chain, you've basically lost the battle. But if you can stop your breach at the installation phase, that's not great, but at least you have, there hasn't been an established command and control channel, but you know, the EDR solution or whichever solution that you are using to kind of stop malicious traffic back and forth has kind of halted that process, which means that the attacker has not been successful. Understanding dwell time, which I won't dive into a little bit more, is a very important topic to touch on as well, but we'll leave that for later on. Then obviously a couple of days later, once you've analyzed more phishing campaigns hitting your organization, you should probably end up with a view like this, right? Where you've had on the left-hand side 4 different campaigns coming after you, 5, 6, 7, 8, how many ever you've observed, and who have been targeted by them. Now, as we say, Mary and Andrew and Lucas are kind of the top offenders in my organization. So what we can derive from this data is that these guys are creating kind of a very vulnerable situation for us because they are part of the compromised credentials out there. Chances are that they will be receiving a lot more phishing attempts against them than probably someone else who hasn't been compromised. So what do we do in this situation? There are a couple of things you can do, but I would suggest that if you are seeing high volumes against a specific account, maybe change the alias or change the email address of that account to mary.something or lucas.something, because once you remove that threat or that risk from the posture, then obviously all emails sent to that specific email address will bounce and they will no longer be delivered, potentially causing a foothold inside of the organization that can turn into lateral movement and backdoor access for an attacker. So this is kind of where we're going to end it. And hopefully with the technology we have today, we have some time to answer some questions. If not, please go on LinkedIn, find me, reach out to me, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. Again, thank you very much to the team at VirtuPort and the team for the MENA ISC event. I'm very sad that we weren't able to host our people in Riyadh this year, but inshallah next year we'll be back and we'll be seeing all of you at the MENA ISC 2021.